Football Fantasy.
Welcome to Keepers Championship Week. I'm Matt Ufford, and I need you to stay focused on your matchup. Don't go getting all sentimental on me just because this is the last episode of the year. We've been through so much together. The injuries, the bye weeks. God, I'm gonna miss you so much, fantasy football. Start Le'Veon Bell. He'll get a heavy workload at Lambeau versus a Packers D that allowed Reggie Bush, Steven Jackson, and DeMarco Murray to compile over 320 yards over the last 3 weeks. For you PPR players, Bell's got 17 catches in his last 3 games. Nice. Sit Drew Brees. This kills me, but the discrepancy between home Brees and road Brees is just too wide. He's averaging an even 28 fantasy points per game at home, but just 17.4 on the road. With a nasty matchup against the Panthers, I'd look to Andy Dalton or even Kirk Cousins in Week 16. Speaking of which, start Kirk Cousins. In his first start of the year, he threw for 381 yards and 3 TDs. Now, the 2 interceptions are a fair indicator of his propensity for turnovers, but the Cowboys and their historically bad pass defense are coming to town, and they've only picked off 2 passes in their last 5 games. Sit Mike Wallace. Over the past 2 seasons where the game time temperature has been under 40 degrees, Wallace has produced a total of just 4 catches for 41 yards and no TDs in 3 games. Oh hey, what's the weather like in Buffalo in December? Yeah, cold? Start Delanie Walker. In Walker's last 4 full games, he's been targeted 38 times and responded with over 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's clearly one of Ryan Fitzpatrick's favorite targets. I don't expect Jacksonville to slow him down this week. Sit Bobby Rainey. Rainey goes to St. Louis to face a Rams defense that's gotten much stronger against the run over the last month. Since their Week 11 bye, they've held Matt Forte, Frank Gore, Rashard Mendenhall, and Pierre Thomas to 3.3 yards per carry. Rainey will have to get in the end zone to notch a worthwhile outing. Start Zach Miller. The Seattle tight end has had a quiet season, but the Cardinals defense has given up 15 touchdowns to tight ends this year, including 1 to Miller in Week 7. Give him a start this week if you don't have a star tight end. Sit Michael Floyd. Since his red-hot streak in Weeks 11 through 13, he's managed just 4 catches over the last 2 games. Add in a nagging ankle injury and a road game against the stingiest defense against wide receivers, and this one's a no-brainer. I was pretty good to you last week. None of my sits went off and none of my starts totally flopped, which, honestly, kind of all I can ever hope for. Among my good calls were starting Steven Jackson, who scored 2 touchdowns and murdered Josh Wilson, and starting Alex Smith, who merely had his best fantasy day ever in 9 years as a pro. Although I will admit, okay, Jamal Charles may have helped him out a little. Let's go to Kansas City, where on Sunday it's going to be snowy with a low of 4 degrees. And by let's go to Kansas City, I mean let's talk about Kansas City. I have 0 desire to be outdoors in single-digit weather, even if it means Jamal Charles runs wild again and wins your fantasy championship. Oh, and for those of you who are thinking about starting Trent Richardson because of his game against Houston last week, he was stopped for 2 yards or less on 14 of his 19 carries. Don't get cute. Hire LeGarrette Blount and fire Mark Ingram. With most of Tom Brady's targets hurt, look for the Pats to lean more heavily on the run, which would benefit Blount, who's rushed for over 40 yards in 6 of New England's past 7 games. Meanwhile, Ingram's an afterthought in Sean Payton's offense. The only explanation for him being owned in so many leagues is that the teams who own him miss the playoffs. Makes sense. Hire Doug Baldwin and fire Kenny Britt. Baldwin leads Seattle in receiving yards and touchdowns, and he's picked his game up in recent weeks, notching over 60 yards in 5 of the Seahawks' last 6 games, catching 4 touchdowns during that stretch. And while Kenny Britt on Sunday managed to catch his first passes since Week 7, congratulations, that was due to Mike Munchak suspending Justin Hunter and Damian Williams. That was Britt's swan song in the Music City. Hire Andrew Quarles and fire Brandon Myers. Quarles has caught 6 passes for 66 yards and a score in each of his last 2 games, as there is now a viable tight end in Green Bay's offense for the first time since Jermichael Finley's injury. As for Myers, 2 words: Eli Manning. Eli's inaccuracy this year has killed the fantasy value of Victor Cruz and Akeem Nicks, and Myers is farther down the ladder from them. Oh no, but that's all. People, this is the end of the last Keepers of the year. Your final outdoor activity of the fantasy offseason is go to the Super Bowl. It's outside in the cold weather. Live it. Well, unless the Ravens are in it. Nobody wants to watch that. Set your lineups. Good luck in your championship. I will see you next year.